The first thing I want to tell you, especially if you're a dedicated historian or a serious survival-minded viewer, is to subscribe to The Prepper Historian, because this channel is built for people like you. People who actually want depth, accuracy and real-world usefulness, not surface-level summaries. And today's guide earns that promise. When most people talk about WWII field shelters, they rush straight to the issue tents, pup tents, tarps or foxholes. But the truth is that the most reliable shelter used by soldiers in some of the harshest conditions wasn't standard issue at all. It was field-crafted, storm-proof and effective in ways modern campers rarely consider. This shelter trick was built out of necessity, perfected in mud, forests, frozen ground and shattered villages, and it outlasted storms that shredded tents and flooded trenches. Before the first minute of this video passes, I want you to know, by the time you finish this guide, you won't think of shelter construction the same way again. Why soldiers relied on the stormproof bough shelter when tents failed. Tents are only as strong as their weakest seam, pole or anchor point. Soldiers in WWII learned that quickly. In the Ardennes, canvas froze stiff and cracked. In the Pacific, monsoon winds tore tent lines loose. In Italy, mountain winds pulled stakes straight out of rocky soil. The shelter that consistently survived where tents failed was the low-profile branch-and-earth structure, commonly called a bough shelter. Allied and Axis troops alike used variations of it. It required no issued materials, blended into the terrain, handled rain better than canvas, and, once built correctly, could stand through multi-day storms with minimal maintenance. Its durability came from the same principle builders rely on today, distributing stress through layered natural materials rather than relying on a single fragile fabric barrier. How WWII troops constructed the bough shelter step by step and why it worked. Soldiers started by choosing the right location. They preferred the leeward side of natural windbreaks, fallen logs, ridges, thickets, because, well, a shelter is only as effective as the site it sits on. They avoided depressions that collected water. Then came the frame. They laid two sturdy branches at a slight angle, sort of like an open triangle, lashing them together with any available cordage, or, if they had to, even strips of clothing. Cross poles were added to help distribute the weight. Over this skeleton, soldiers layered pine boughs, spruce limbs, or any evergreen foliage in overlapping, shingle-like rows. The key was orientation. Foliage pointed downward so water would shed naturally instead of soaking inward. After that came the final layer, earth. Soldiers shoveled soil, leaves, sod and debris onto the shelter, turning it into a sort of miniature hillside. This added insulation, weight and water resistance. It also anchored the shelter so wind gusts couldn't lift or flex it. The result was a compact, low-silhouette structure that blended into the terrain and, stayed warm even in freezing rain. Even when tents were blown into the tree line or turned into swimming pools, these shelters stayed intact. Why this World War II shelter still beats many modern emergency shelters today. Modern survival gear is excellent until, well, it fails. Tarps puncture. tents collapse, emergency blankets tear. A bough shelter, built correctly, is essentially a living structure. It maintains its form because it uses thick organic layers that resist wind and shed water instead of fighting against it. The low shape reduces the sail effect that rips tents apart. The earth layer buffers temperature swings, keeping the interior warmer at night and, honestly, cooler in the afternoon. And because the materials replenish themselves, repairs are fast and free. We soldiers return to these shelters after artillery blasts, storms, and freezing nights because they simply worked. And that is why experienced outdoorsmen still build versions of them today when conditions are unpredictable. How you can apply this WWII shelter method in realistic survival or field scenarios. If you're out in the woods, working on historical reenactments, long-term preparedness drills, or even documenting fieldcraft for research, the principles remain identical. Let's begin with site selection. You'll want to pick a location that offers natural cover from the dominant wind direction. And if the ground happens to be wet, it's best to elevate your sleeping area using branches, grass, or even a small layer of dry debris, just like soldiers did back in the forests of Belarus and the Carpathians. Next up, you'll need to build the frame. Use 2 thick branches placed at an angle and support them with a third crosspiece, or even a nearby stump if one's handy. It's important to make sure the angle is shallow enough to shed water, but still high enough for you to crawl inside comfortably. Now, when you start layering boughs, it's a good idea to overlap them more densely than you might expect. During WWII, troops often use 2 to 3 full layers before adding any earth. If you skip straight to soil, well, your shelter will almost certainly leak. After the foliage layer, you'll want to gather leaf litter duff and loose earth, and just cover the entire exterior until really it becomes pretty much indistinguishable from the ground around it. The more organic material you add, the longer it lasts, and honestly, the better it handles rainfall. Many historians working in field conditions during archaeological surveys actually use this exact method during extended expeditions, simply because it allows them to stay dry without hauling heavy shelter equipment. What modern survivalists can learn from the soldiers who perfected this method is quite important. The value of this World War II shelter trick isn't nostalgia. It's proof that low-tech solutions, often outlast high-tech gear when conditions turn harsh. Soldiers didn't build these shelters for fun. They built them because they needed something that just wouldn't fail under wind, rain, and even artillery shockwaves. The method teaches discipline. Choose your ground wisely, build the frame solidly, layer patiently, and rely on natural materials instead of fragile manufactured ones. It also teaches realism. Gear breaks, weather shifts, plans collapse. But knowledge, especially knowledge developed under wartime pressure, doesn't fail when you need it most. Closing with a reminder that history is a tool, not trivia. If you're here, you already know that lessons from the past aren't meant to sit in books. They're meant to be applied. This World War II storm-proof shelter technique is one of those lessons. Whether you're preparing for fieldwork, studying battlefield conditions, improving your survival skills, or simply deepening your understanding of soldiers' lived experiences, this is a skill worth practicing. And if you want more deeply researched, practical, historically grounded guides like this one, make sure you subscribe to The Prepper Historian and share this video with someone who appreciates real history, not the watered-down version.